in transport mode basically what happens is that you keep the original header and you encrypt everything, because you know signing basically means that the other end will be able to verify it. Okay. So, I do not know whether I have told you, but generally I mean the general concept for signing is, if you use say public key cryptography, the general concept for authentication is that the data packet is to be signed by the sender. Signed by what? The private key of the sender, so that anybody can decrypt it using the public key of the sender. Okay. That is the usage of signature. I mean, I am not telling whether it is digital, electronic, etcetera signature, I am just telling the concept, that this is the very simple, most easy concept. Why? Because the public key is available with everybody, just like the case that when you receive a certificate, you see the signature, you know that yes, this is a genuine certificate, just like that you can verify the signature. So, here how will you verify? Because you have the public key of everybody, so you can verify. But the interesting part is that, say there is somebody in the middle who has got the, who can see the data packet and can take it up also, those different types of attacks. Okay. It can only say, I mean delay the transmission of the packet, it cannot sign it. It may open up the packet and see the contents, right, but it is never going to sign it, because it does not have the original private key of the original sender. If it does that, it will be caught at the receiving end. Hence, what happens is that, just here you can understand that basically you can encrypt the data first with the public key of the receiver. So, basically what you can do is that, suppose you have this data, okay, and say this is the sender. So, the sender encrypts it with receiver's public key and then sign it with sender private. Okay. It travels to receiver. So, receiver over here. Okay. What happens? At first this is sender's private key. So, it can be stripped off by using sender's public key. So, you get the inner one. It can also be stripped off by receiver's private key. So, you get the original data back. And therefore, if there is anybody in the middle, suppose some x is there in the middle, okay, what it can do? It can get, it can also strip off the outer layer, because it has the sender's public key. But since the data inside is encrypted and it requires the original receiver's private key, it is unable to see the data, and now it cannot also send it back, because it has already stripped off the outer layer. Okay. So, this is how you can easily secure your packet as well as ensure that you are the original sender. So, what we were talking about. So, now everything is more or less clear. What happens in this transport mode and tunnel mode. Okay. So, we can move. So, let us see what are the algorithms that are used. HMAC SHA1 for integrity protection and authenticity. So, basically these are hash algorithms, HMAC. Okay. And what is MAC? Yes, it is of course mandatory access control, but it is also the message authentication code. So, just let us see the algorithms first. So, triple DS CBC for confidentiality, AES CBC for confidentiality, and all these two are block cipher algorithms. Okay. So, therefore, that padding is required, remember, that is why those things were required. Now, as far as if we go back to the earlier slide, say for example, here, okay. Say in this slide, suppose you also want to say that the data is the same, that nothing has happened to the data during this transit. Okay. How will you ensure that? Then that means data integrity. This is maintaining your data confidentiality, remember, but you may not be sure that, say, this man in the middle who is X, he might have hacked this actual receiver, okay, and might have got the private key also, we never know. Okay. And they may not be using only public key crypto system, they may be using symmetric key crypto system also. In that case, this encryption and decryption key will be the same, and if it is not changed frequently, then sometimes or the other it may be known to at least some persons, some I mean node or malicious node. Okay. So, there may be many things. Now, suppose you want to ensure that the data that you are receiving is correct. That is also very important for different types of transactions. For example, say in monetary transactions, okay, monetary transactions where online you are paying. So, in that cases the amount is very, very important, that you have spent say rupees 1000, such that it is reflected as rupees 1000. Maybe confidentiality is not that much of an issue. In such cases, it can be an issue, I do not mind. I mean, it may be confidential as well as, but the value is also of very importance. Okay, that 1000, I have marked 1000, the payment gateway shall also delete, I mean take away 1000 from me. In such cases, what we use is that either message digest or say some sort of hash function. What does that mean? Nothing, they are footprints. Okay. And what type of footprints? That means you apply some function, mathematical function, the mathematical function may be very, very simple, but you will not be able to, I mean repeat it backwards. It is not that I do here say A into B plus C, and on the other side I also reverse the functionalities and I get back the original, because if you try to reverse, then it will give you so many different results maybe, and in many ways that particular footprint may be obtained. For example, say your data is say 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, you can simply get the footprint as 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, which is 4 plus 3 7, 9, 10. Okay. Now, in how many ways you can generate 10? Many ways. Okay. So, you may never get back, I mean not never, I shall say, within the time and space you may not get this original 1, 2, 3, 4, right. And you see this function is so very simple, nothing in it, everybody can do and in minimal amount of time, right. So, this is how you can use a hash function, so that at the other end, at the receiving end also somebody can check it, but obviously at the receiving end also the same hash function has to be used, and since it is one way, so the original data must be there. Okay. So, along with this type of communication, whatever we are doing here, you can also add, say, since you are already encrypting the data. So, data is already there, ultimately the receiver can get back the original data, and to check you can simply add this hash of data somewhere, either here or here or here, wherever you want, because it will be then the at this point it will be received hash, and then the receiver has to calculate, receiver calculates hash of received data, that means this one. So, if these two matches, received hash, that means this one, and suppose this is h dashed, if h matches with h dashed, then only the receiver understands that yes, the data has not been changed during communication. So, these are the requirements in your IP security, that means authentication for both data and origin integrity, and in this way they can be included. That is why all those algorithms are there. Some algorithms are for encryption, decryption, and the other algorithms are for these authentication purposes. So, IPsec is usually implemented in the kernel with key management, and the negotiation is carried out from user space. This very broad, lengthy abbreviation is nothing but it is the scheme name. Okay. Existing IPsec implementations often include both of them, okay, depending upon the requirements of security of the application. And obviously, people think that now since everybody is aware, so why do not include all, let the users decide what they will take. So, just imagine all these things are happening and we are thinking that we are not getting connection. What is happening? My data rate is becoming slow. So many things happen with every single say connection. Okay. Have you heard about stateful and stateless? Stateful means when these connections occur, if the server side, suppose there is a connection between server and client, okay. If everybody remembers everything, that means here the client is asking for some service. So, if the server remembers the client, then in the next session when this client comes up, then it will be easier for the server. So, that is stateful, okay. And stateless, obviously server does not remember anything, because it may have so many number of clients, okay. How long can it remember? So, in stateless what can happen is that whenever the client comes up again, then it has to again do the entire negotiation and everything, and it may be such that the some clients may not come, say may not come up until say 30-40 days. So, why shall I remember? So, that we have already dealt with the network layer. So, we can now move to the transport layer security. Okay. So, it is TLS. So, TLS and its predecessor secure sockets layer SSL, you might have seen in the many pages it is written SSL, handshake and other things, are cryptographic protocols that provide security for communications. TLS and SSL encrypt the segments of network connections at the transport layer end to end. Transport layer is always end to end, is not it? Let us see if we can find answers later on. So, TLS allows client server applications to communicate in a way designed to prevent eavesdropping and tampering. So, that means not only that snooping type of thing, eavesdropping is nothing but snooping, but also the modification or alteration, that means tampering with the data. So, basically it means that the data is therefore somehow encrypted or something like that, so that tampering cannot occur. And how can eavesdropping be prevented? Can you think of it? Eavesdropping is nothing but simply, yes, encryption is there. So, you cannot see the data, but can you know who is sending to whom? In the channel everything is open, is not it? Yes. Let us see if it does something. So, TLS provides endpoint authentication and communications confidentiality using cryptography. Of course, other than cryptography there is nothing. It provides RSA security. RSA, have you come across? I think in the typical end user browser usage, that means people like us, TLS authentication is unilateral, only the server is authenticated, but not vice versa till some point of time. Okay. However, it also now supports the more secure bilateral connection mode, because it is also required, because you may not know, I mean somebody may be using your browser also maliciously. Suppose you have kept your browser open, it happens many a times. So, mutual authentication requires that the TLS client side also holds a certificate. Typically, the key information and certificates necessary for TLS are handled in the form of a particular type of digital certificate specification format, you can say X.509, very well known, which define the required fields and data formats. That means, in such certificates you will have the necessary information for the party that you wish to authenticate. Now, since everything belongs to cryptography, so obviously we must know the different types of algorithms that are to be used, when, how, etc. So, Cipher Suite has to be declared among the communicating parties. So, when this connection is established, the client and server negotiate a Cipher Suite, which specifies a combination of cryptographic algorithms to be used for the connection. Very simple, again as I told you that just like a list going on to give tick marks, okay, just like that, nothing else. The key exchange and authentication algorithms are typically public key algorithms. So, that means the default or the general usage for key exchange and authentication algorithms are public key. So, whenever it is public key algorithm, you know that you have to generate key pair. So, how will you generate the key pair? Why will you trust that this is the public key of such and such, say, client? There comes the roles of the certificates that we have just now told. Okay. Whenever there is a concept of this public and private key, then I can always say that, oh, this is my public key, right. So, why will you believe that this is my public key really? So, I have to give a proof that yes, this is really my public key. So, that is where the role of the certificate is. Okay. The certificate will tell that, my certificate will tell that. The message authentication codes are made up from cryptographic hash functions using the HMAC construction that we have also seen in the IPsec. And the one that I showed you as example, the calculation of hash function, you can also make it a bit more complicated by giving another parameter. Say for example, we were doing the sum of the digits, right. So, you can simply generate some key and say multiply it by that, sum of the digits multiplied by the key. Okay. So, whenever the data is received at the receiving end, the same thing will be done. That means, at first the key will be retrieved, that key generally it is the same key used on both sides of course, right, and then the same hash function will be evaluated. So, message authentication code basically means that, right, you may use a key along with the some particular hash function or something like that, and also a non-standard pseudorandom function. Why it is mentioning non-standard? Because actually though we tell that these are random functions and other things, after many runs you may be able to get a pattern on the random numbers that are generated. My friend from ISI may help us in that. After many runs, I am telling, maybe not in our day to day life or algorithms, where we run say for 50 runs or something like that, not like that. But you will tend to get a pattern. I am not telling that the same key will be generated, because you are changing the seed, right, you are changing some other things. You can change the seed randomly also, you can change the seed in some pattern also. Okay. So, everything after some time will get a pattern. That is why we cannot say that the randomized functions, the sorry not randomized functions, the functions for calculating random numbers are really giving you random numbers always. That is why firstly we are telling that these are pseudorandom numbers. TLS and SSL have a variety of security measures, like the client may use the certificate authority's public key to validate the CA's digital signature on the server's certificate. This is a very lengthy sentence. The essence is that I have told you that a client may possess a certificate, right. Now, somebody has signed the certificate, the certification authority, and all of us know that the signature has to be evaluated, that means have to be verified by the one who get the certificate. I mean, to whom I am showing. Suppose I am showing this certificate to my employer. So, the employer must recognize that this is the certificate of CA1 for example. So, CA1, as I have already told you, that the signature means signing with own private key, because the CA1 is a recognized body, its public key is known. So, anybody can decrypt the signature, authenticate the signature. So, my employer would get hold of the public key of the CA1, authenticate the signature of the CA1 first. That signature is on the certificate bottom like this. So, just like this, say this is the certificate. So, here is the signature. Okay. So, that means it is signed using the private key, so that I can retrieve using CA public. But whose certificate is this? This certificate of client, right. So, now I am showing this say to my employer. So, employer knows that really this is the CA's, this certificate is provided by the CA, and therefore, it can verify the client now. because the certificate again contains many different fields. If the digital signature can be verified, the client accepts the server certificate as a valid certificate issued by the trusted CA. This is telling about the existing first one way authentication, that means the server authentication by the client. Now, since it is both ways, okay. So, client also produces a similar certificate to the server. This particular statement is talking about the server authenticating itself to the client, whether I will say I am a client, whether I will join this server or not, because I may have say not information, advertisements say from different services and servers. So, say the same service is offered by more than one servers. So, I have to choose somebody. Okay. So, the servers will all line up. So, they will show their certificates to me. So, this is the existing authentication, but now even the server may demand that how do I know that you are a valid client or authenticated client. Okay. So, I will also have to produce my certificate. The client verifies that the issuing CA is on its list of trusted CAs. So, that means this CA is definitely on the list that is provided in the network. You can also see for yourself and find out who are able to issue certificates, okay, digital certificates. There are several authorities in for India also. The client checks the server's certificate validity period. Okay. That means, in the certificate, in this 1, 2, 3, 4 field, there will be some validity period also. Just like I mean in the bank, you have to produce your KYC from time to time, like that validity sort of thing, that whether you are still continuing with these things. Protection against a downgrade of the protocol to a previous or less secure version or a weaker Cipher Suite, that is also there. That means, you do not know if the validity period is much longer, then maybe the certificate was old. Okay. So, we have protection in the TLS for all such things. Numbering all the application records with a sequence number. So, that is very true. Okay. And using this sequence number in the message authentication codes. So, that means the key that I was talking about. So, it would be the same in both sender and receiver, is not it, because I am expecting say message number 20 from you. So, when you send next, it will be message number 20. So, that is dynamic also, and you do not have to generate also. You see, there are so many ways you can generate such keys dynamically without any complexity. Using a message digest enhanced with a key. So, only a key holder can check the MAC, obviously, because even if some X in the middle gets hold of that, it may not know which sequence number is expected. So, it will never be able to open it. And suppose it has got some key, it does not know that it is the sequence number. So, maybe after various trial and error, it has come up that 10 is the key. So, it will try, but in vain. The message that ends the handshake sends a hash of all the exchanged handshake messages by both parties. We are going into details of this handshake, what are the different steps, then you will understand. That means, at the completion of the handshake, a hash of all the exchanged handshake messages will be with both the parties. So, that if I have some doubts at any point of time, I can just recheck. Then also I can find out whether the party that I am talking with now is the original one or not. The pseudorandom function splits the input data in half and processes each one. I mean, these are all the processing parts. We may not go into the details. Okay. Obviously, it will employ many different techniques to get the best out of the security measures. Okay. So, this may provides protection even if one of these algorithms is found to be vulnerable. Okay. And this is a very common practice that the input data is split into half, and after some steps it is reversed, and some I mean executions, some particular methods go on in one half, some very different methods on another half, and so on. Okay. Actually, here it means that the essence of the message digest concept. Okay. Always newer versions are coming up and with lesser vulnerability and other things, you know. SHA 256, yes, but actually everything is changing and they are sometimes finding out some vulnerabilities of the new algorithm and then again reverting back, and it is I mean till not I shall say that everything is very fixed, but only the standards, since they are there, I mean standards are published. So, you have to abide by the rules, that is most important. A TLS client and server negotiate a stateful connection by using a handshaking procedure. During this handshake, the client and server agree on various parameters used to establish the connection security. The handshake begins when a client connects to a TLS-enabled server requesting a secure connection and presents a list of supported Cipher suites, mentioned it in steps 1 and 2, whatever. The thing is that firstly, this TLS handshake protocol, this is the first one that will be executing when I ask for some connection with somebody, handshaking. Okay? Because in the handshaking part, you know that all the particularities will be exchanged. And you see the name handshake, the terminology handshake has come from the handshake, how do you do? Okay? So, just exchange of pleasantries, like that here also the protocol pleasantries. So, you see firstly the client connects to the server requesting a connection and presents the list of supported Cipher suites by the client side. Remember, since I am requesting for a connection, so I am presenting whatever I have or whatever I can use. Okay. The server picks up the cipher and hash function that it also supports and notifies the client. Okay. That is why I told that it is simply a case of tick marking, nothing else. And you may say that suppose either the client or the server is very advanced and they do not support like this the same algorithm. So, protection against those downgraded versions are also there. Okay. So, that can be used, no problem. The server sends back its identification in the form of a digital certificate. Okay. The certificate usually contains the server name, the trusted CA and the server's public encryption key. So, you see that 1, 2, 3, 4 fields basically mean these things. That means, the name of the entity for which this certificate is issued, here it is the server, therefore, the server's name, the trusted CA's, trusted CA means that means the CA's public key and other things, everything, the CA who has signed this certificate. The validity period is also mentioned. I have not mentioned all the fields, the validity period is there, and the server's public encryption key, because as I have said earlier that how do I know that whatever you are claiming to be your public key is actually your public key. So, somebody in the position should say that. So, here the CA or the certificate authority issues the certificate in the name of the server telling such and such details about the server. So, I will now believe, because I can verify. I may not believe it offhand, because I can verify that yes, this is the some original CA. The client may contact the server that issued the certificate, that means the CA, and confirm that the certificate is authenticated. In order to generate the session keys, the client encrypts a random number with the server's public key and sends the result to the server. So, the client now has the server's public key, and you know very well that this encrypted number cannot be decrypted by anybody other than the server itself, because the server has the private key corresponding to its own public key. So, even if somebody grabs this in the middle, it will be of no use. Maybe after some timeout or something, the client will again try to pick up another random number and say encrypt it with the server's public key and send. And now, after the server received this, the server can decrypt using its private key and get back the random number. And in fact, if you remember those key exchange protocols, Needham, Schroeder and others, always they again send back something. The server optionally can send back another random number encrypted with something, so that the client knows that yes, the same random number has been reaching there.